Let me set the scene. It's 5094. I've been playing this campaign for quite a while. As Austria, as you may guess, I have crushed the Ottomans rather early on, reducing them to a single province and enforcing them to be Orthodox. I have grew my empire through France and for some forsaken reason into England. I've expanded into the Mamluk lands and gone much into Timurids and into the Persia region. I've converted all of this land into Catholic in my attempt at a one faith with Austria. But as I do this, as I look at a Jan von Habsburg who's pretty old now, sitting as an heir to the Spanish throne, I start to notice one thing. I can't be bothered. Sure, I may have conquered huge swaths of Europe, but fundamentally, the truth remains, is that there is still so much world left to conquer. Of course, the great DLC updates that added so much more content to India were fascinating. But before those updates, you could get done with India in like 1 or 2 wars. Now it's like a 100-year adventure. Sure, Majapahit has so much more wonderful content going for it, but now to take this one island is like 10 wars. I don't have time for that, and neither do I have the patience. Sure, I'd love to do a one faith, but for a game called Europa Universalis 4, there sure is way too much content outside of Europe. And it brings me to a fundamental point, that while playing EU4, I feel much like Alexander the Great, for I weep, for there was still so much goddamn world left to conquer. Will I stand by this? No. That's why I am proud to announce a solution to this problem. So, with that, we are introducing the new and revolutionary EU4 that we all know and love, but I remove all the non-European parts, as defined by EU4 itself. Now, every mod exists to solve problems. And what are the 3 main problems facing society today? Well, let's begin with problem number 1, racism. According to my calculations, this province in Kentucky here is the source of 98.3% of the world's racism supply. By deleting it, I have eliminated the majority of racism. Now I hear you say, Lemon Cake, that's not Kentucky, that's Bangkok in Southeast Asia. To which I respond with, shut up. Moving on, problem number 2. Religion. Right, that's it. Yeah, you all couldn't behave. That's it. No more Jerusalem. It's gone. No more Jerusalem. It's actually quite funny because when I was making this mod first time around, Medina didn't get nuked, so I guess if you need proof of divine intervention, there you go. Not the best proof, of course. Managed to get rid of it by round 2. But with that, move swiftly on to problem number 3. Poland. Yeah, they're just too strong. I've learned my lesson. You can't fight Big Poland. You have to accept the truth. Big Poland is here, and Big Poland is here to stay. Right, but joking aside now, let's start talking actual changes. So this is actually intended to be played in our current grand campaign. Normally it's taken over the world, but I'm thinking let's do something different for once. So for the coming weeks, our MP on our Discord server will be run using this mod. Hopefully to get a decent amount of players in there. If you want to join, now's the next time. Very much a Battle Royale scenario, so there we go. Balance update wise, we've had a couple idea reworks. For example, here in Portugal, we can't see this, but if we quickly put debug mode on and tag ourselves into Portugal, we will find that we now have 5% discipline in our finishers instead of the colonial buffs we had, and instead of a colonist, we now get, colonial growth, we now get 25% land force modifier, and so on and so on. So, for example, France, that used to have native uprising chance and native assimilation, now has 10% goods produced. So there's just been a couple small reworks in that kind of regard. Another thing that I do have to mention now immediately is the 6 uncolonized provinces in Europe have been changed. Let me quickly get rid of Terran Cognita so I can show you. If you colonize Tenerife, it's now been set to 30 development, and owning Tenerife counts as owning the entire quote-unquote New World Empire, giving you this modifier, New World Empire. Now, obviously, if someone takes over Tenerife from you, you lose this, but it's a pretty nice thing to have. Gives you 10 flat land force limit, 25% land force limit modifier, a bit of national manpower modifier, and that 48 yearly tax comes around, 4 tax income per month. And that 20% goods produced makes up for the abysmal lack of trade. Which brings us to another thing. Turns out Europe, without everyone else in the world, really struggles economically. Like, Aleppo's barely scraping by a ducat here. So with that, another thing I've done to quote-unquote make up for that is Russia, which tends to rely very heavily on Siberian trade and nicking Asians' trade. Now, instead, Siberia, which for some reason these 5 provinces are part of Europe. All 5 of these can be colonized. I've removed Siberian frontiers, by the way. This is for balance reasons. You can't colonize with a colonist a zero-debt province, but you can Siberian frontier a zero-debt province. So for that reason, Siberian frontiers have been removed from the Russian idea group and are replaced with this. Every single one of these 5 provinces have a Siberian trade, giving you half a ducat of tax, and 5 goods produced. Now, these are random, so good luck. Will you get naval supplies? Will you get salt? Up to the 5 goods produced. In my couple test runs of this means around 5 to 6 ducats arrive from this node into Kazan, which is crucial for keeping Russia afloat, especially as a major power. Again, to really stretch this, no node even breaks 20 ducats, and Constantinople is barely scraping by 6. So the total wealth of the world has been reduced significantly. But there we go. Another major balance update to quickly go over is, again, I've played majority of MP games, and now that I'm finally making a mod, I did take this opportunity to finally nerf quantity ideas. I think quantity ideas are still the best, but they now only give 25% national manpower and 25 land force limit. Really brings them in line with all the other modifiers, because the 50% force limit and the 50% manpower was just way too strong. It kind of made it so that there was no question what for idea group should go for first. There was no question about it. You would always go quantity. I think quantity is still the best idea group, but a couple other things, for example, quality nerfs with the cavalry combat ability and artillery combat ability should make up for it somewhat. And defensive has now been buffed slightly, giving you Yeti Arm Tradition again on the first one. This actually used to be in the game. They nerfed defensive by getting rid of this, so I kind of brought that back. I think that's fair. And I slightly increased the fort maintenance reduction from defensive mentality. So if you plan to spam forts everywhere, this is going to serve you a bit better. But that kind of is the majority of the changes. It's been relatively light. So there we go. Now, if you're watching this on the day it came out, on the 10th of October, then thanks. In around a week's time, going to have our first session on the Discord server link below. Basically playing, hopefully, a pretty big MP campaign. Everyone here, if you would like to join, then, well, join the server and send me a ping. Outside of that, we will also, on the same server, be running an event, which will be looking at basically take any tag you want and achieve a 1 tag, conquer every single tag here. So you don't have to core it, it's when you 1 tag own everything. So, not great powers, only you exist. I mean no subjects as well. I may have to end up banning a Holy Roman Empire Austria revoke, because that would definitely be the fastest to do that. But it would be just a quote-unquote 1 tag world conquest when all of the conquest is just Europe. As I have gone pretty meticulously through this, there is no dodgy weird... well, I remember there was, for some reason, some Japanese miners survived, and random bits of China, for some reason, really climb onto life. And for no reason whatsoever, this island here, I did a test run, and I was like, why is there trade value coming from the Ivory Coast? It turns out this used to be 3 dev, and AI Portugal colonized it, so that's actually quite funny. Which brings us to a second point. Quite a few last second balance stages. Age of Discovery has been changed, where everyone discovered Europe at the start of the game. Everyone discovers the New World at the start of the game, so now the first requirement is to be 250 development. And instead of getting high development colonies giving you +1 to everything, you now get dev cost reduction -10. And if you're playing as Portugal again, you double dip with that, getting 20 dev cost reduction. And before you think this is way too broken, 1500s this goes away. And on top of that, Portugal I think is probably one of the hardest starts, with the Castile definitely breathing down its neck. Moving on as well, another thing I have changed is, of course, in the base game there would be no way to spawn colonialism, because spawning colonialism would normally require owning a colonial nation in the New World, which is impossible. So now the only requirement for spawning colonialism is you to be on Europe, Asia, or Africa, which by definition everyone is in Europe. So every single province is eligible to spawn colonialism. But there we go. That concludes this overlook of that mod. So as always, thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see you around soon. Worst comes to worst, in a week's time for the first session.